Hey everyone, it's Kep here. This is going to be a SEVAGOTH video. I'm going to be completely honest with you. This is probably going to be a really long video, and it's going to be a pretty confusing one as well. SEVAGOTH is just one of those frames where there is a lot of misinformation going out around his abilities. Some things just aren't true that a lot of people are saying. I'm not going to come in with numbers. I'm just going to try and loosely explain how these abilities are interacting with each other and why certain things like augments are really important for SEVAGOTH. But this is how I build SEVAGOTH, and this is really, I really do think that this is the best way that you can play SEVAGOTH. Genuinely, this is an incredibly comfortable and really strong build. This build absolutely goes to level cap. I actually had a recording that I did with Nev and Nova Umbral, and it was probably one of the easiest level cap void cascades I've ever done in my life. Genuinely, having the shadow and everything like that, having condemn to be able to shield gate, and then being able to run around viral priming with your reap and sow allows you to kill any enemy on the map. You will be great at ad clear. You will immediately nuke Thraxes. It's amazing. You can kill acolytes with the shadow, but I'm gonna get into all this, and yeah. So basically, I'm gonna jingle the keys in front of your face. We're gonna go bop 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 bop, and they're all dead. So the keys have been jingled in front of your face. Now, let's talk about how SEVAGOTH's nuke works. So if we come over to the ability description here and we look at Reap, what Reap says it does is it gives damage vulnerability, it does radiation damage, and it has a radius of 11.6 meters. So, what can we infer from this? Nothing. We don't know anything from this ability because there's so much going on underneath the hood that they're not telling us about. It's the same thing for So. Hiccup. So basically is telling us that you use the ability and in a 23-meter radius, it's going to do damage per second. Well, this damage per second has a really odd icon, right? And you can see that kind of X icon. I can't actually highlight it because if I move my mouse, it'll go away. But this X icon, what this stands for is called true damage. So our Reap does radiation damage, but our Sow does true damage. Essentially, what true damage is it is basically a damage type in Warframe that doesn't care about enemy damage reduction. It doesn't care about enemy level. All it does is deal damage to the base values of that enemy. And so there's a lot of weird math going on in figuring out the base health values of enemies and everything like that. But what is important to note about the true damage from SEVAGOTH is that it's a percentage-based drain. AKA, depending on your power strength, that percentage-based drain will increase or decrease. Now, why is this really important? Is because you actually don't need a lot of power strength when it comes to SEVAGOTH because we can make up for that with viral procs. At the start of the video, when I killed all these enemies, you saw I used my epitaph. That's because we have viral procs on these enemies over here. These viral procs allow us to multiply the true damage that is happening to these enemies, and it's going to take the percentage-based damage that we do, and it's going to multiply it by however many stacks of viral we have. Meaning, you know, at 10 stacks of viral, we're doing 3.25 times damage to enemy health, which means we're going to be doing 3 times the amount of damage that our Reap and Sow do when they collide, which means in an AoE around them, that explosion is going to be dealing basically their entire health bar. Simply depending on how many viral stacks were present, how many enemies around them were present, you know, the density of the group really matters because there's going to be a small explosion around. So, that is how it works. So when you use Reap on an enemy and this shadow collides, there's going to be an 11-meter radius around that shadow. I say 11 meters because I'm running one range mod on my SEVAGOTH. You see the radius is 11 meters. So anyway, I'm looking, it will spawn that ghost. This ghost will wander around, and you're going to see these kind of, these flames or something like that. They're going to sort of run around, or, I mean, not run around, but these flames are going to be coming out of the enemies. These flames indicate the damage vulnerability. So now, if we come over here and we really quickly look, they're going to be vulnerable to 84% of damage, which is a 84% damage multiplicative bonus, which actually means that instead of being 84%, what this is doing, it's going to be 1.84 times damage to enemies around here, which is really great because this does mean you can make some kind of weapons platform build if you really wanted with SEVAGOTH. However, this is quite important when it comes to nuking enemies, because as far as I know, this damage vulnerability is also taken into account in the Reap and Sow explosion. But I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong. When we sow an enemy, you're going to see over here that we are doing ability damage. So it says 420 ability damage over here, and if we look at sow, it's going to be 420.5, so this absolutely adds up. And this damage is going to be true damage. As you see, it's going to be doing barely any damage. However, sown enemies, when we spawn this ghost, will cause that ghost to detonate that sow. And you're going to see that detonation will carry across multiple enemies, and it's going to trigger that detonation over and over and over again. So being able to use sow or reap multiple times is going to cause that explosion to happen. So see over here, even though the ghost isn't physically touching them, that explosion is still happening. And it's still detonating them because it's actually an 11-meter radius around this ghost. So if we pop the ghost and then we use sow on like that, you're going to see the ghost runs in through here and causes the explosion to trigger multiple times across every enemy over here. As you can see, every single one of these enemies are missing about a third of their health. And that's what the damage percentage that we're going to be gaining from this build is, about a third of their health. The good news about that is that our efficiency is so incredibly high with this build. It means we're able to use our abilities a lot. So, if we really quickly look into the ability tab, it says that our range for sow is 23 meters. So if we ping this very first enemy over here and we walk 23 meters away, just about, right, maybe around here, we're going to see that enemy right there. If we walk within 11 meters of that enemy and then we use our ghost, you're going to see this guy over here, it basically got hit by that ghost. Occasionally, depending on what your range is, you will also hit the enemies over here, but it's really important that basically you understand that in an 11-meter radius, that is going to hit the enemy. Obviously, that didn't detonate the explosion because this guy wasn't sown. So really quickly, if I come over here, so this guy, these two guys over here are sown, and if I look this way, it's still going to cause the explosion because this ghost is in a big bubble around 11 meters. So that is how the range of SEVAGOTH's abilities work. That's why you don't actually need like a super ton of range when you're modding for him, is because the ghost has this big bubble around him, or around, the ghost has a big bubble around itself, and it's going to be exploding enemies when they come in contact with sown enemies. Ugh! Confusing. I know, it's really stupid. Well, it's not stupid, it's just like weird. It's like super duper weird, and you really need reap and sow at the same time in order to be able to pull that off. Now, so many people absolutely glaze Condemn. In my professional opinion, I think Condemn is kind of useless. Great if you're running like a health tanking build or something like that, right? Like if you really, really need the health, then sure, Gloom is going to be your best friend because you're just going to be able to heal like oodles of amounts because you don't need to kill an enemy in order to heal. It's just going to be dealing like a percentage-based heal depending on how much damage you do, which is amazing. However, it is a really, really, really heavy energy sink. Hiccup. Meaning, if you're in a group of enemies or something like that, and you have Gloom up, you're going to be losing so much energy when it comes to that. So I have opted to replace Gloom with Condemn. Because Condemn, in my opinion, really, really fits with the theme of SEVAGOTH. In this update in particular, Condemn is actually broken. The alpha on the chains is really borked. But Condemn is really nice for a couple of reasons. A, we shield gate with it, and B, we actually stop the enemies completely in their tracks. So, would you rather stop an enemy completely, or would you rather slow them down? The best part about that is because it has no strength requirement, and we don't need to hit some kind of breakpoint to reach 90% slow with Gloom, which is a really, really high amount of strength in order to reach 90% slow as Gloom. We can just freeze them outright and shield gate off of it and spend less energy because we're basically able to freeze this entire group of enemies over here with one single use of our Condemn. And it only costs 10 energy. And it refreshes our shield. It is just in general a much, much better survivability tool when it comes to running around and doing your thing. The best part is that you can kind of just run around and send the Condemn basically wherever you need to, which is really, really nice. So being able to have a lot of freedom with where that Condemn hits and how it spawns allows you to really... You can basically send it across a wall and continue running, and so long as it hits two enemies over there, you're going to be shield getting yourself quite nicely. The best part about that is it travels in a wave, meaning if there's enemies behind the enemies that you're currently fighting, it will continue to refresh your shield over and over again, and you'll continue to do these tiny shield gates, which will actually allow you to absorb much more damage by the wave traveling through the crowd. Now, on to the bread and butter of this build, which is SEVAGOTH's Shadow. SEVAGOTH's Shadow is so very neglected. I cannot tell you how neglected this ability is. So many people just tend to decide that SEVAGOTH's Shadow is just not good for any reason. But let me tell you, it is insanely, insanely strong for a ton of reasons. And basically, yeah, I don't know where I was gonna go with there, but yes, Shadow good. Shadow really, really good. Its first ability is going to group up enemies, which if you mod for a decent amount of range, actually has a ton of range. These enemies are going to continue and they're going to be immobilized. The cool thing is that if you hop into your SEVAGOTH, you can actually use finishers on these enemies. So if you're using some kind of build that requires you needing crit chance or anything like that, you can actually pop in and out of your Shadow, and you can basically build up melee crescendo stacks with your Shadow, which is really quite nice. The second ability over here is called Consume. This is basically going to absolutely yonk an enemy, and it's basically just going to send like their soul out of their body. So enemies that get hit by this are going to get knocked away, which is kind of cool. However, there's a special version of this ability when you're in SEVAGOTH's passive. When you do die, that will basically insta-kill whatever enemy you're targeting, which is really, really nice, because if the overguard on an Xmas unit or something like that is broken, you can basically just run in, consume them, and then they're going to be cooked. SEVAGOTH's third ability, or his Shadow's third ability, is Death Harvest. If we look at the ability description over here, Death Harvest is going to give a damage vulnerability, which is quite nice. And basically, that's all it's supposed to do. However, if we combine it with the augments that we have from SEVAGOTH's if we combine it with the augments that we have on our build, it allows it to proc So. So Death's Harvest is basically the SEVAGOTH Shadow version of So. The good news about that is if we kill an enemy, it's going to spawn these little ghosts over here, and these ghosts will cause the detonation that Reap and Sow does. Why is this so important? Well, it means that we can deal an incredible amount of high concentrated damage into a single area that is percentage based and allows us to really, really mow through enemies. So it's super duper strong, on top of the fact that it also does give us a damage vulnerability to an enemy, which means that the damage I'm doing to an enemy, just like this, is going to be really, really, really strong. Speaking of super strong, the claws in general are incredibly good. Basically, if I just want to kill this entire group of enemies over here, I can just do this, and they're going to eventually bleed out. As you can see over here, they're going to start dying. I really quickly need to refresh my death well. We spawn these enemies again. It does suck a little bit that you're on a timer and you kind of can't refresh the timer while you're in the Shadow. However, once you're in the Shadow, once again, you group these enemies up, you do that, and one heavy attack is going to be enough to absolutely eviscerate them. The reason why the heavy attack is so strong is because A, it's going to be multiplying your critical chance by 2, and B, is it has 2 guaranteed slash procs and guaranteed impact procs, meaning the enemy gets staggered and they get a massive slash proc on them. The other part about the heavy attack from the Shadow that's really, really important is the fact that A, it has quite a bit of horizontal range. You can see over there, that guy was hit. So even though we don't have a lot of upfront range with SEVAGOTH Shadows, we do have a lot of side-to-side range when it comes to that heavy attack, which means we're going to be clearing out a big bubble in front of us, which is quite nice. But it hits headshots, which is really, 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 really nice, because that's just going to continue to add to the damage. So, because SEVAGOTH Shadow is technically considered an ability, you might be seeing toxin damage, and as you can see over here, the toxin damage that we're dealing is going to convert into corrosive damage as well, which means that our toxin damage is going to do a lot of damage. Our slash procs are also going to be doing a lot of damage, so we're going to be doing upfront damage via toxin and corrosive to enemies, and we're also going to be doing damage that is going to bypass enemy armor with the slash procs over here. That is the true power of this build. And the best part about it is that if you combo up some attack speed and some wind up with your secondary fire, or not your secondary fire, but your heavy attack, right? You're able to really, really quickly dispatch an entire group of enemies just with your Shadow, just like this. I didn't even need to use a heavy attack. You're just going to absolutely get shredded. The best part about this is because of our augment, we also have Shadow Haze, which is going to increase our critical chance, which I didn't get a chance to show you because the death well ran out, but that also increases your critical chance on your Shadow by quite a lot, and it's going to let you really do a ton of heavy attack damage. So, let's get on to the build. I am running 2 duration shards, 2 casting speed shards, and 1 parkour velocity shard. Parkour velocity on SEVAGOTH is really nice because you are going to be a caster frame, so you're just going to run through your different rooms and you're just going to be wanting to spam those abilities as much as possible. The other nice thing about that is if we run into our shadow, we're able to mod for extra parkour velocity on our shadow, which means that we can actually really get around with our shadow. I have Firewalker, as you can see there's a little fire effect as I bullet jump. That's giving me a lot of parkour velocity, and I also have the parkour velocity shard that's going to be affecting my shadow, which means I have a really good time getting around. Hiccup again. So yeah, on top of the fact that you're also able to use consume, and consume is also going to be a straight dash, which means if you really need to, you can actually really quickly change directions and continue and preserve momentum, which means, you know, you can actually like fucking zip around. You're incredibly mobile as a shadow because of consume. So if you're ever trying to run through Netrocells, which is actually normally where I take SEVAGOTH, you're going to have a really easy time traversing that tile set because you can absolutely just turn on a dime when it comes to that. You can see how easy it is to run around and navigate these pillars. So really good for mobility in general. Having a parkour velocity shard on SEVAGOTH's shadow is going to help you a lot. If we dive into the build over here, you're going to see we have Growing Power as our aura mod. You can replace this with some other stuff. As I said, there's, you know, some silly things that you could do. Like if you wanted, you could use Brief Respite and take Condemn off. However, this particular build, if you wanted to use Brief Respite, you would have to sub out a mod slot for catalyzing shields, as well as run negative efficiency, so your energy economy overall is going to be really bad, and you're not going to be able to shield gate quite as well with Condemn. So Brief Respite is an option to you, but I don't recommend it. We don't need to care about armor, specifically because our Reap and Sow does true damage, so true damage bypasses armor completely. Enemy radar is a decent option when it comes to things, and, you know, other things, like just in general, like sprint boost or seal charge will be beneficial. I do not believe that SEVAGOTH's aura mod will benefit his shadow and vice versa, because I do believe that at some point there was something like that happened. But if it applies to enemies, I do believe it will work. So it's kind of weird and silly how it works, but in general, I really would say that Growing Power is probably the best aura mod that you could put on SEVAGOTH. We have Prime Sure-Footed. This is very obvious. He's a caster frame. He's going to be shield gating with an ability. If you get knocked down, you're cooked. So you kind of really need that. Now, if we look at our range ability, or a range mod over here, as you can see, it's just stretch. The best part is that the range on Sow and Reap are actually pretty good, and because you're very highly mobile and you're going to be using your abilities a lot, you don't need to invest anything more into your range, which is really, really nice. So it's very, very comfy having it at just 45%. You don't really need anything else. If we go down one slot over here, you're going to see we have Transient Fortitude. This is going to take a little bit of a hit to our duration, but the best part is because our efficiency is so high, we can use our abilities as much as we want. We don't really care about duration, you know, and we also have Molt Efficiency as well, which this is kind of a flex pick if you want to. There's a couple of things we can sub that off, but I'll tell you about that in a second. But having, you know, at least 100% duration on our Reap and Sow is going to be perfectly fine. 10 seconds for Sow, and another 10 seconds for the duration of Reap, or that's the debuff duration of Reap. Reap will just fly around for 5 seconds. But yeah, basically, you know, a little bit of a tank to our duration, on top of the fact that we have a fleeting expertise, which I'll get onto that in a second. To recuperate that duration, though, we have Archon Continuity. This is really important because, as I mentioned, SEVAGOTH's Shadow counts as an ability, which is why we're able to mod for Toxin damage and allow that SEVAGOTH Shadow to proc Toxin, Corrosive, and Slash, and Impact, which is really, really nice. So definitely something you absolutely want to use. It's going to be doing the bulk of getting our duration back to where it needs to be, on top of these two Talforge duration shards, which is going to get it all the way basically up to 100%, plus Multi-Efficiency if you want to use it. So I have used this build without Multi-Efficiency. It's just kind of hard to figure out what to put in there because there's not really a lot of options, but in general, I would say you absolutely do not need a crazy amount of duration when it comes to SEVAGOTH because your efficiency is so high. Speaking of efficiency, we have Fleeting Expertise, Equilibrium, and Prime Flow. This is a lot of energy economy that we have within these three mods, right? 60% ability efficiency, positive efficiency, is so dead in the meta right now. People barely run efficiency mods on their Warframes, which kills me because a lot of the times they mod for too much strength. There's different different breakpoints and different things that happen in your frames that you don't actually need all that strength for. And losing out on 99% strength might feel like a lot, but in general, what you lose in having a really potent ability, you gain in having the comfort ability and the option to use that ability multiple times. Fleeting Expertise is a really, really good mod for that. And because efficiency is capped out at 75%, it allows you to basically, we don't need to worry about putting Streamline onto this, right? Because we're only losing out on 15% of our efficiency, which means that having just Fleeting Expertise here means we can cast all these abilities. We can use all 3 of our abilities for what? 40 energy? Our energy economy is 641. We can use all of our abilities like more than 10 times over. That is insane. That is so insane. On top of the fact that Equilibrium is just such a good energy generation tool and our efficiency is so high, it doesn't matter if Xmas unit spawns are super low because we have a huge reservoir of energy we can pull from. Our efficiency is so high, and when we do get energy, we're going to be getting basically 200, which will fuel another, however many uses of these abilities that we need. Now, on to the augment mods. Dark Propagation and Shadow Haze are basically required. A lot of people, for some very weird reason, do not include Shadow Haze because the description is a little bit misleading. Before we get to Shadow Haze, I'm going to read off Dark Propagation because it is a simple one. As you can see over here, Dark Propagation, So Augment, enemies killed while inflicted with So spread its status effect in a 15-meter radius. Shadow's Death Harvest also inflicts So. Now, I do not think that this mod allows Death Harvest to inflict So. I think Death Harvest will always inflict So because I took Dark Propagation off and I tested it with my SEVAGOTH Shadow, and Death's Harvest still spawned the allowed like the propagation. So either it's bugged or the description is just a little bit misleading and it's just reminding players that Death's Harvest also inflicts So. I'm not entirely sure, but as I said, it's going to be very confusing. Dark Propagation just works in really weird ways, and in my testing, unless I remove the wrong mod, I'm not entirely sure. In my testing, it was just completely like weird. It's just odd, but all we need to know is that when an enemy dies under the effects of So, it's going to spread them in a 21-meter radius, which as you can see over here on the ability tab, because we have a stretch mod, it's going to be 21 meters, as the base range is going to be 15. Shadow Haze is the interesting one. The Reap Augment increases critical chance by 50% on enemies inflicted with Death Harvest. A new shadow emerges from those enemies when they perish. Limit of 3 shadows. So, when an enemy afflicted by the damage vulnerability of a Reap dies, it spawns a new shadow, up to a maximum of 3. These 3 shadows are independent of your first ability shadow, meaning you can have 4 up at a time. All 4 of these shadows are going to spread that damage vulnerability to other enemies. They're going to seek out enemies that have been sown. Enemies that have been sown, when they come into an 11-meter radius of that shadow, are going to cause the detonation, dealing a percentage-based amount of damage to their health. That is really, really, really strong. The best part about this as well is as we kill enemies, because Death's Harvest is considered, what is it? Because Death's Harvest is considered So, when we kill an enemy that is sown, it spawns a new shadow, and that shadow thus will spawn more of that, and basically enemies will get that critical chance effect to them, and now you gain the critical chance of an enemy, of one of these shadows coming in contact with an enemy. That is Shadow Haze. It's really confusing, it's really weird, but we need both of these augments to interact with each other to get the full potential out of SEVAGOTH. A lot of people leave out Shadow Haze or Dark Propagation depending on, however they feel, if they want to do like a weapons platform build with SEVAGOTH. But trust me, having both on really, really matters. Now, on to the arcanes. We have Molt Augmented. This is fairly simple. This is just going to help us reach a little bit higher of a percentage-based thing. So long as there's not, maximum of 10 viral stacks, we will still be one-shotting them. This just helps in general with the percentage-based strain that Reap and So does. And Molt Efficiency. This can be a lot of things for you. It's kind of really hard to tell. Because the arcanes that we have on our main Warframe don't particularly translate to our shadow, we can't use something like Arcane Arachne or any of these mods really to fuel our shadow. The only options for you, personally, for this build in particular, is going to be Multi-Efficiency or Arcane Steadfast. Arcane Steadfast is great because if we have a bunch of energy over here and we just spam our abilities, Arcane Steadfast is going to proc and it's going to make our efficiency even higher. Now, in my opinion, it is a little bit overkill with the amount of abilities that we're going to be able to use. So I've swapped it out for efficiency. Efficiency is just going to give us a little bit of a bonus when it comes to our duration, which just means things will occasionally last a little bit longer. That is quite nice, as well as because we can have the shadow over here, and the shadow is going to, the debuff is going to last longer, which allows us to proc the shadow haze, which is quite nice. Okay. Oh. Okay. Yeah. Frickin' thing. So, yeah. Basically, Dark Propagation inflicts Shadow's Harvest, or like so will inflict Death's Harvest, and Death's Harvest will inflict So they both do the same thing. And enemies who die who spawn a ghost, right? So increases critical chance by 50% on enemies inflicted with Death's Harvest. A new shadow emerges from those enemies, right? So then, because So technically counts as Death's Harvest, the shadows that are emerging from these enemies will give you the crit chance, and it's confusing. Now, let's go on to the build for his shadow. Swift momentum and preparation. As I said, preparation is super duper important when it comes to SEVAGOTH, especially on his shadow specifically, because, as I said, you're going to be able to tab in and out of your shadow and allow yourself to really take advantage of the energy. So if you ever do run out of energy, you can just pop back in and out depending on how long you've been into your shadow, which is quite nice because you have those couple seconds to spam your invulnerabilities, which means you can basically use your embrace to suck up as many enemies as possible to stop yourself from getting any damage. Rolling Guard is really important for our shadow, as there is an option to health tank, which I haven't actually set up here. I did have a setup for health tanking, but I decided to swap off of it because it wasn't particularly useful, but it was like a health energy tank because the armor on SEVAGOTH's shadow is actually quite high. But Rolling Guard is going to be very useful, so we have 4 seconds of invulnerability when we enter our shadow, and then we also get the 3 seconds, and this goes on a 7-second cooldown, which means if you make up a couple of seconds or you swap back to your normal SEVAGOTH, you can reset this Rolling Guard timer again and gain another 7 seconds of invulnerability, which is quite very comfortable, especially because you're basically able to just run around with your shadow and deal like fuck tons of damage. It's going to be very nice to keep that in your back pocket. Overextended is quite good because the range on Embrace is already pretty high. I think Embrace's base range is 20 meters, so we use Overextended to increase that even more. Unfortunately, we can't increase the angle that Embraces, but it's perfectly fine in my eyes because 48 meters is really, really, really far. If we really quickly prime up these enemies, kill this guys. As you can see, if we ping this first enemy over here, 38 meters is all the way over here, right? So, as you can see, that first kind of couple of enemies got pulled from our Embrace, which is really, really nice, and they will eventually bleed out right in front of us. I'm just going to kill those enemies, spawn another 20. So 38 meters is absolutely serviceable when it comes to SEVAGOTH Shadow, especially for Embrace in particular, is going to be very useful. We have Consume, which is going to travel for 26 meters, which is quite nice. It does radiation damage, which is like very meh. It will rarely kill enemies. However, when you go into your passive, it will kill enemies for you. But the lifesteal in this case is not like super duper useful IMO unless you are running an armor tanking build with your SEVAGOTH Shadow. Death's Harvest is very important. This is basically the So equivalent of our Shadow, which is quite nice, and it's also going to be giving a larger damage vulnerability to enemies because our strength is a lot higher because we're using 2 of our Umbral mods. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, you do not need 2 Umbral Forma for this build. Please, dear God, do not put 2 Umbral Forma. When I got SEVAGOTH Prime, I became LR1. And they gave me a bunch of Umbral Forma, and I was like, where can I use this? And I used it on the fucking Shadow, because I thought it would be really funny to put 2 Umbral Forma on SEVAGOTH Shadow, because everybody always cons the Shadow. Do not do this. You do not need to worry about this whatsoever. You can absolutely have normal strength mods, or in my opinion, it is probably better off if you replace Umbral Intensify with something like Transient Fortitude, and then, you know, Umbral Vitality can be saved for some other kind of slot. Realistically, in the future, I probably will just form this over and get rid of both of these slots because I really don't need the health, and I'll be able to mod for something like Sprint Speed or even more Parkour Velocity on his Shadow, which means I'll be able to get around quite easy. Realistically, Amar's Anguish is going to be a really nice mod, specifically because that 10-meter teleport is going to help quite a bit, especially if you want to blip around with your Shadow. But yeah, basically 2 Umbral mods here. You don't need them whatsoever. Just replace them with other mods. It's not that hard to figure out. A Firewalker is here to give us quite a bit of parkour velocity. This can be mobilized really easily if you wanted to as well, because it does take like 30k endo to max out Firewalker, which is really, really shitty. This can be sprint speed. This can be anything. The Shadow cannot get knocked down, which is very, very nice. So we don't need anything like handspring or this or that or the other thing. So yeah, it's kind of up to you what you want to use. In my opinion, really the best in slot here is just for quality of life is, you know, something like you could use Coaction Drift to speed up your melee windup, which would be quite nice, but aside from that, you know, really Amar's Anguish or, you know, yeah, there's not really anything else that I can really think of that is going to help your shtick. If you wanted to, you could actually be really silly and run a slam build with SEVAGOTH Prime Shadow, because it actually does have the base stats to support that. However, you won't be getting the 18-meter range that Slam Star gives you, but it is still very serviceable, let me tell you that. But yeah, so Near's Anguish is also something you can do. You can run the Near set as well for slam build. Anyways, Prime Flow is here. Unfortunately, SEVAGOTH Shadow's energy is kind of crappy, so Prime Flow is only going to do a little bit, but even still it is going to be fairly useful. And then we also have Archon Continuity. You can actually use normal continuity when it comes to this. You don't really need to worry about that, but because I have Archon Continuity, I just threw it on there. Either of these are interchangeable, but I do recommend having Archon Continuity on your base SEVAGOTH because that's where it really matters. And for our arcanes, we have Arcane Strike and Arcane Fury. You can swap this out for some different arcanes. If you are running a health tanking build, you can actually run Arcane Bellicose, which is kind of nice. You won't be able to max it out, but it still will be a really nice strength bonus. So if you wanted a ton of damage vulnerability, you absolutely could use it. Arcane Reaper is also quite nice if you're running an armor tanking setup on your Shadow. But in general, I would just stick with the 2 melee mods here because it's going to help you out quite a bit. Coming on to the shadows over here, we have Prime Fury, Prime Fever Strike. Prime Fever Strike is obviously just going to give us a metric fuck ton of toxin damage, which is really nice. Prime Fury is going to be great, not only is because it's going to boost our attack speed, but it's going to help our heavy attacks as well. And because it is a very heavy attack focused build and we don't have access to a lot of wind-up mods, having this Prime Fury is going to help us quite a bit. Prime range is absolutely required. As you can see over here, the base range of SEVAGOTH's claws are fucking 1.5 meters. However, as I did say, the horizontal range of the heavy attack is really, really far. Anyways, Primed Reach is going to be very necessary. Prime Pressure Point is also really good, especially because this is going to be a heavy attack build. Having these two combined with each other is going to influence them like quite a bit. So as you can see, just Prime Fever Strike by itself is going to give us 600 toxin damage, and then removing this, or actually let's just look at the base damage really quickly, right? So just having Prime Fever Strike, our base damage goes up to 1000, right? And then if we take this off, just having Prime Pressure Point, it's also going to go up to 1000. So even if we're not proccing Toxin, we want both of these mods to combine. And because they're both worth 1000, however they interact kind of weirdly, I think that's like a multiplicative bonus and everything like that. We actually get a base damage total of 2017, as well as a really, really juiced up 1600. We don't need to worry about what our Toxin or our impact damage is because we're getting guaranteed Toxin and impact slash from our heavy attack. So what I really do care about just in general here is going to be what our stage chances, as well as the toxin damage that we're doing. Unfortunately, the crit damage is not the super greatest. Organ Shatter is also not the super greatest. However, we can boost this up with, where's my Galvanized Steel. Now, if I were you, genuinely, I would probably put Galvanized Steel in the Sacrificial Steel slot. But as I said, I had a lot of Umbra Forma, so please put Galvanized Steel into this slot. The crit damage is going to help you way more than the little bit of extra crit tier, especially because you're going to have the extra critical chance from your augment mod on base SEVAGOTH, so you don't need all this critical chance. But once again, the extra crit damage is going to be useful. So it's very nothing burger over here. Galvanized Reflex is very, very good, especially because it's going to be a heavy attack build. If you do not want to use Galvanized Reflex, you can use something like Condition Overload, because we're going to be proccing, you know, a decent amount of procs on our enemies. Enduring Affliction is actually very silly, because Consume from our claws actually procs the lifted status effect over here. So not Consume, but Embrace procs a lifted status effect. So if you wanted to, you could actually give yourself a bunch of status. I do believe that Enduring Affliction is multiplicative. I could be wrong. I could be super wrong. Do not quote me on that whatsoever, but I think it's multiplicative, meaning you basically double your effective status chance. But I could be wrong. Genuinely, I don't know. The reason why I don't have it on this particular build is because it's a heavy attack build, and trust me, it does absolutely fine. So we don't really need that, and it feels like it's a little bit limiting to have to constantly be pulling in our enemies in order to be able to do the damage that we need. So what you lose in, you know, Enduring Affliction, you gain with a higher base combo that you can use for your heavy attacks and everything like that. Galvanized Elementalist is absolutely required because A, it's going to give us 120% status chance, which is quite nice. So 120% of our status chance over here currently would be, it would make our status chance just over about 60%, I believe, which is quite nice, especially if we have 100% follow through on our targets and our attack speed is quite good. That's definitely a serviceable amount of status chance to apply a lot of toxin procs, but yeah, Discipline's Merit, very, very useful. I wouldn't use anything else because it is the best for getting consistent heavy attacks, which is really, really nice. That's really the DPS that we're going to be worrying about, right? So we come over here, and all we need to do is pop in, we do our Death's Harvest, and yeah, you're going to see over here, enemies are going to be dying quite a bit. So yeah, that's the shadows. That's SEVAGOTH Shadow. You're gonna see oodles and oodles of crit chance, and then we can do the big one like that. That's 3.7 million toxin proc on a heavy attack. So I'm gonna bring this into some Void Cascade really quick. We're gonna return to base of operations, and I'm just gonna show you what it looks like in Void Cascade. The best part about SEVAGOTH is you don't need a. What? Oh. Okay, that's cool. Sure. Okay. Okay, alright. I thought I got a gift or something. I completely forgot about Tenenbaum. I'm going to take my primary off because I really don't need it. The secondary doesn't matter a ton, but in this case I do like to use the Furex Wraith, specifically because we have Amalgam Furex body count, which increases the fire rate of secondary weapons. For our Sentinel, I recommend something that's reliable, and that's going to help you a lot, so I think that Worm Prime is really, really good in this case, because Worm Prime is going to be able to use Negate, which is going to clear ourselves of status effects, which means Xmas units are going to be a little bit less annoying, as well as the fact that we can kind of run around and, you know, get silly crit stuff with our other weapons and such. But it doesn't particularly matter. What we are worrying about is Reinforced Bond, because Worm Prime is one of those Sentinels that is able to get over 1200 shields. So we're going to get another fire rate bonus from Reinforced Bond. So there's a couple of moving parts when it comes to that, but really quickly I'm also going to copy that just to get the same gray. Okay, we're all good. Worm Prime is a great Sentinel. It's super duper comfy. But now we are going to head over to Zarman, and oh my gosh, we have an Omnia Fissure. Let's go. I am going to play through this. Now I do want to preface again that this build absolutely goes to level cap, like super easily too, by the way, like really, really, really disgustingly easy. So I'm going to have, you know, the time of my life here. Bonk, dead. Oh no, I'm taking damage, bonk. Refresh. So you might encounter some small issues when you don't have Xmas units quite off the rip, and that is perfectly okay, because I'm just going to come over here, just like that, and then now I can kind of pop in and out of my shadow. Once again, we are kind of relying on Xmas units to kickstart ourselves, so I'm really quickly just going to pop an energy thing, refresh our shields. Here we go, we got an Xmas. Now we got all the energy we need. As Xmas units start spawning, we're going to be perfectly fine. It is always at the start of the mission that Xmas units don't spawn, so if you're running a setup like this, like I just recommend popping an energy pizza or something because you're probably going to need it. But yeah, basically we can run around, do oodles of damage. Pop that rolling guard. Our rolling guard is up, so we can come over here and prime. Enemies are just going to be dying. We can run our condemn. I also have fortifier on my epitaph, which is really nice. So fortifier comes in handy. There we go, get the energy from that. Now I can hop back to my shadow. Boom! Let him bleed out. And if I die, that's no biggie. Yeah, the best part about having that shadow up is that even if you do die, it's not like it matters at all, because it doesn't punish you whatsoever for dying in your shadow, which is just awesome. So you, like, seriously don't need to matter. Oh, I wanted to swap in and out for the energy gain. Yeah. It's literally, it's like the easiest fucking day in my life. There's so many layers. The best part is that if I let them kill me, right? If I let them kill me like this, which is gonna happen now instantly, I keep over gating. All I need to do, bonk, and bonk, bonk, bonk. Use my rolling guard, I get extra time, and now I'm back up. Easy peasy. No energy cost, I still have my death vial. I can basically use anything that I need. Hey, come back here, you silly little goose. Bonk, he's gonna bleed out. Oh, I got killed. Yeah, super easy time with your shadow. Realistically, like, yeah, you're gonna have an awesome time. If this was level capped, I'd be dying nearly instantly, but it's no biggie in my case. I can just really quickly kill that guy. As you can see, killing Thraxes has literally never been easier. Like, it's just a couple of viral stacks, and then they're cooked. And because we're running Fortifier... Ooh, there's an Acolyte. Perfect. I also wanted to mention how good your Shadow is at killing Acolytes. So I'm really quickly going to build this up. Come on, big guy. Oh. Hey! Come here, boy! Oh, wait, what? Excuse me, that's rude. Dead. Yeah, super duper useful. This guy over here is gonna need to die. And yeah, basically, Void Cascade is a fucking breeze. I actually have not tested if Reap and Sow works on Demolus, but I doubt it does, considering they're special targets. But the good news is that it works on enemies through Overguard, which is quite nice. So you really do not need to worry about anything. Having Epitaph on an enemy is also great, because if we have any DOTs, we're going to be able to proc that Overgate, which means we don't need to rely on Condemn quite as much. But yeah, our energy's at 100%. We don't really need to worry about anything here, really. And now, we can just fucking zoom to extract. This is gonna count as something like that. Which is kind of cringe. Oh, probably shouldn't extract until I get my reward. LOL! But yeah. I botched my gameplay, I'm not gonna lie. But it's super easy. Like, it's just a skill issue on my part. This is the first game I've actually played today. But I will tell you right here and right now that SEVAGOTH is just absolutely fucking butt busted. Although, also, by the way, I forgot to mention, SEVAGOTH Shadow does count as another Warframe, meaning Warframe abilities that normally would shut you down do not apply to SEVAGOTH Shadow, aka a Nullifier Bubble is not going to kick you out of your Shadow, which is amazing. Which is actually great, because our Shadow is kind of able to just fucking vibe. Also, all those enemies are deleted. All those enemies back there are gonna end up getting deleted. It's great. But yeah, there's not much I can show you unless it was like level cap gameplay, but I fucking lost the footage for that, so I'm angy. But that's my SEVAGOTH build. That's a 44-minute on SEVAGOTH. I like he's good. He's really good. You just got to get used to playing him. You got to get over that little hurdle at the first couple minutes of the mission because there's no Xmas spawning. But once you get the energy, you're going to be absolutely all right. We've Silvered the Yin, which is actually kind of dripped out. I would probably change one of those metal tones to silver, but I fuck with the fashion. I'm not going to lie. Okay. You guys have a good time.